As you may or may not know, I grew up in upstate New York. And out in the northeastern part of our country, the school year typically starts after Labor Day. And so around this particular time of year, I'm used to wearing my new school clothes and my new school shoes and starting the new school year right along with the NFL season. And this also means that I'm very accustomed at this time of year to delivering a certain type of report. As you may recall, during those first days of school, it is customary for students to stand up in front of their new classmates and offer a verbal presentation always titled, "What I Did on My Summer Vacation." Do you remember those? Growing up, every year, right around September 10th, I would stand in front of my classroom and tell the group what I did on my summer vacation. Do you see where this is going? Don't worry, this will still be a sermon based on the gospel text. But as I looked at that gospel passage assigned for today, I couldn't help but realize that a lot of my summer this year focused around the lessons that Jesus is trying to teach us with his words in Matthew's gospel this morning. In that passage, Jesus speaks to his disciples about how to keep the community of faith together. He lays out a clear process, a step-by-step guide for dealing with conflict in the community, a plan for reconciliation and repairing relationships with other members of the church. And I believe that Jesus says these things not only because he knows that repairing relationships will be essential if the church is going to continue, but also because Jesus knew how essential relationships are for our human well-being. You see, one of the things I did on my summer vacation was read a lot of books. One of the books I read this summer was called The Good Life. And this book was written by the directors of the Harvard Study of Adult Development, the longest scientific study on human happiness ever conducted. And while this book contains many great insights and stories and observations, the overwhelming finding of this 80-year study is that human happiness is most influenced by relationships. The Harvard study that this book reports on has been going on for over 80 years, but thousands of years before this study even began, Jesus knew just how important it was to maintain healthy relationships. When you look at Jesus' ministry, you start to see this as the consistent common thread. When Jesus healed people, he made them physically well, and by healing them, he removed the barriers that were forcing these people to live as outcasts in the society. When Jesus argued with the religious leaders, it was always about the way that their interpretation of the religious laws were alienating certain groups of people. And when Jesus rose from the dead, he appeared to whole groups of people so that their faith could be affirmed together. You see, it's all about relationships. Jesus seemed to know that God designed us from the start to be relational beings. God hardwired within us a need, a longing to be in relationship with our neighbors and in relationship with God. That's why Jesus wanted to give such clear instructions to his disciples about how members of the church should handle their disagreements. But don't take my word for it. Don't take the word of the Harvard study on happiness for it. Don't even take Jesus' word for it, although you probably should. But just think back about your summer for a second. Aren't your favorite memories of the last month those you shared with other people? As much as I love reading by myself under the tree in my front yard, I loved even more the nights when I sat in my front yard with my neighbors and simply had good conversations together. Or the times I spent at the pool playing with my kids. Or the trip we took this summer to see our old friends in Philadelphia, or the time I spent in Granby with my parents and sisters and their families. The best moments of my summer, and I'm guessing of your summer as well, were the moments spent with other people. I know that relationships can be messy and a lot of hard work, I know that some of you are introverts and you get a little freaked out by the thought of being around lots of other people, but even still, we all continue to need connection with others because there's something inherently life-giving about these human relationships. That's what Jesus is getting at in the end of the gospel reading. He offers that famous line, "Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them." Now, when I was the pastor of a very small church, this passage would get quoted a lot when only 2 people showed up for Bible study. But I don't think that Jesus was saying this so that we could have an excuse for poor attendance. No, Jesus is trying to help us see that when we connect with others, we connect with God. That God, the source of all life in the universe, is there with us when we gather in community. There is something life-giving about human connection. In fact, in another book I read this summer titled "Own Your Past, Change Your Future," author John Deloney describes the scientific research that has arisen around loneliness. Loneliness has been labeled by health authorities as an epidemic in our culture because of its widespread presence in our world and because of the incredibly destructive effects loneliness has on our physical health. It is not good for one to be alone and isolated and lonely. But then the flip side of that also means that when we are with others in healthy, respectful relationships, it is literally life-giving. When 2 or 3 are gathered, God, the author of life, is there with us, bringing us to greater health and vitality. God is there with us when we talk with our friends about our struggles at work. God appears in our midst when that colleague unexpectedly drops by just to cheer us up after a hard day. God is present when friends show up in our home to check in on us as we deal with our grief. We need each other. Our world is filled with lonely people, and so much healing could be found if we all just prioritized our relationships a little bit more. In fact, in another book I read this summer, I learned about a meeting where a group of faith leaders invited their local mayor to come and speak with the group about how their churches could better serve the community. And in that conversation, the mayor said this: "The majority of the issues in our town that we are facing would be eliminated or drastically reduced if we could just figure out a way to become a community of great neighbors." After that meeting, one of the pastors in attendance said to the group, "Is anyone else embarrassed that the mayor basically just said that things would be better if we just lived out Jesus' command to love our neighbors?" You see, it's all about relationships. Jesus gives his disciples clear instructions about how to restore relationships and maintain the church community. And Harvard professors conclude that relationships are essential for human happiness. And health professionals surmise that relationships are crucial for health and well-being. And city mayors notice that people committing to being great neighbors would transform a town. As summer ends and we head into the fall, I pray that Bethany will be a place where we all find more of these life-giving relationships that are so essential for our existence. I pray that we'll find ways to connect with the lonely people that God places along our path in life so that they can begin to heal. I pray that Bethany can be a place where people find the support they've longed for. I pray that our relationship with God and knowledge of that divine love will inspire us to show love to our neighbors and thereby change the world for the better. Because it's all about relationships. Our happiness and well-being, our life and practice of faith, Jesus' words and ministry. It's all about relationships. May we hold the sacred relationships God has blessed us with. May we work to repair the friendships that have fractured, and may we show love to our neighbors so that they too might know the blessing of relationships and the love and presence of God. Amen.